Hi and welcome. I'm Steve Martireno, and this is the Behavioral Corner. You're invited to hang with us as we discuss the ways we live today, the choices we make, the things we do, and how they affect our health and well-being. So you're on the corner, the Behavioral Corner. Please hang around a while. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Behavioral Corner. It's me again, Steve Martireno. We're hanging here on this little podcast that we like to say is the podcast about everything, because that's what winds up affecting our behavioral health, everything. The podcast is made possible through our great partners, Retreat Behavioral Health. You'll hear more about them a little bit later on. So let me bring you up to speed on what September has been all about here on the corner, and that is it's National Recovery Month, and it's really important to focus on the notion of recovery. Because as you know, I don't have to explain to you, life can deal you a pretty rotten hand when it comes to your mental or physical health and well-being. And that's difficult in whatever context you want to talk about. But it's very important, and this is why September is set up to remind people that no matter what the situation may be, recovery happens. It happens across a broad range of problems, from very serious physical things to substance abuse issues and mental health issues. People get better. They do. It's very important to remind people of that. That's what we've been doing here on the corner in September, and that's what we're going to do today. And in an interesting way, because the first time I spoke to our guest, I was surprised to learn so many things I didn't know about something I thought I understood, which were eating disorders. To that end, we welcome a great friend of the show. She's been on a couple of times before this, Dr. Rhonda Epstein. Dr. Epstein is a PhD in clinical psychology. And as a result of that, she treats a wide range of issues with a specialty in eating disorders and food addictions. So hi, Dr. Epstein. Good to see you again on the corner.
Hey, Steve. It's always good to be with you.
So, at the beginning there, I explained that what we do is focus on recovery because it's a word that's thrown around a lot. I don't know that there is one thing that constitutes recovery. I think recovery is an individual process. It changes from people to people and situation to situation. But we want to talk about the possibility of recovery with eating disorders or food addictions, how that recovery might be achieved, and most importantly, what would it wind up looking like? So let's begin at the other end of this. What are eating disorders? What are some typical eating disorders that you deal with?
Well, I particularly specialize in overeating, and food addiction is my focus. So, people have questions about whether food addiction is a real thing, but in my world, it is. So I work with the people who have totally lost control, who cannot stop eating. Usually it's not broccoli and chicken that they're overeating. It's usually sugar and fast food, high fat, highly processed foods, and all that junk stuff. And so in terms of eating disorders, of course, there's other ones like anorexia, bulimia. I also treat because that's also in the category. Binge eating disorder is another one that's, these can be overlapping, and sometimes food addiction can be in the other eating disorders. So they're not always. So bulimia is not always food addiction. Binge eating disorder is not always food addiction. But I specifically work with food as a chemical dependency. Yeah.
The first time we talked about this way back when, I was struck by that phrase, food addiction. How is it possible to be addicted to food? After all, we need food. But and you've explained it perfectly. But before we get to that, you just said something that's really amazing. You're right. It isn't people. People do not get in trouble eating broccoli or healthy foods. Now, I know sugar is the main component here, I guess, with regard to addiction as well. But psychologically, what have you learned? What can you tell us about why people don't binge on broccoli. Well, I mean, why not? Some people like broccoli. I like broccoli. Also like I also like I also like donuts, and I can see myself overdoing it on donuts much quicker than I can on broccoli. Is that just the sugar, or is there something psychological going on here?
or something physical. I mean, it's a combination of things. No, you don't get a hit in your brain from broccoli. I mean, broccoli is nourishing our body. It's providing what we need for energy and for our health and our well-being. And yes, it tastes good. And I think on some level, it will taste good, especially if you put some things on it that make it taste good. My broccoli tastes good. I put a little olive oil and garlic.
Right, of course.
So, little salt and pepper, you got to make it taste good, right? On its own, I'm not sure if it's that delicious, but yeah, steamed broccoli is all right. It's not.
Yeah, but I hear you. But
you're not getting a kick. Actually, what they see in the brain, if you actually look at scientific brain studies, you can see that when you eat the donut, which is not just sugar, it's sugar and fat and other things that are put together in just the right combination, so that your pleasure centers in your brain, the same place that gets hit where heroin and alcohol and cocaine get hit, the same place in the brain is getting a hit. That's why we have experienced like comfort, or why we get an ecstatic sort of orgasmic, you say, oh my gosh, this is orgasmic, I have to have more, or I can't stop eating it, because it has more of an effect on the pleasure centers in the brain.
Yeah, so chemistry is the answer. It's the distinguishing feature. No matter how much you like broccoli, it's going to be chocolates and donuts that get you.
Yeah. And there are people, by the way, who in the eating disorders world who will binge on vegetables.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, that's more the anorexic, bulimirexic, who their obsession with weight is so great, they wouldn't let themselves go for the donut.
I see. So. The distinction there, I guess, then is a psychological one. The two things are different. Someone addicted to food is operating on a different disorder level than someone who is a bulimic or anorexic. So you were among the first people I ever heard of who looked at food as an addiction on the addiction model.
You won't meet too many people. I mean, it's getting bigger. I mean, they have big quit sugar summits and kick sugar summits, and doctors now who are psychiatrists and endocrinologists and big doctors who are out there who are really actually going even after the food industry, because they feel like they're making us sick with cardiovascular disease and diabetes. And I mean, people are really getting sick and obesity related issues. And there's a serious problem that's related to sugar, lots of them. And so nowadays people are starting to catch on that it's a really big problem, and it's addictive. You could see it in the brain. I mean, even since when I first met you and we first started talking about it till today, if you were to look at the research 10 years ago to now, I mean, there's booming research now where people are saying it's addictive, and it's really growing the knowledge now in the science about it. Yeah.
Well, we were for my entire life shown a food pyramid that didn't have sugar in its proper place, decided that fat would be the villain. And so they sold us food that they told us was low in fat because fat was dangerous, and failed to point out that they were loading everything else up with sugar, which was really the killer. It's funny how that works out when the sugar industry finances the research. But as you point out, that's changed. So we're learning a lot more about that. It's fascinating stuff. Yeah. Do you see more people who you treat on the addiction end or the mood disorder side?
Me, I mean, personally, people find, I mean, I actually, because I know I'm unique in my specialty, I make sure that I'm out there. I make sure I do work with people who have anxiety and adjustment disorders and depression and other things. I work with couples. I work with other addictions. I work with families of addictions. But I advertise, I write books, and I speak on food addiction because I know I'm really one of only a very small handful of people who do this, and I want to make sure people can find me.
Well, let's talk about it in general then, on whether it's an addiction or as you said, a mood disorder situation. Do we have any idea what causes someone to become addicted to food?
Well, yeah, there's a number of things. I mean, you have genetic factors.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, actually, as I do histories with people, usually you see other addictions in people. I almost never meet a person with a food addiction who doesn't have something. It's either obesity in their family or eating disorders or alcoholism or other addictions in the family. You never meet somebody who just shows up a food addict. There's also oftentimes trauma in the background. It's a very high percentage of people who have abuse, growing up in a tough family situation with arguing and fighting or bullying. Everyone has a story. There's some kind of a story. Mm-hmm. Whether it's small traumas or big ones, there's usually some sort of trauma. And with regards to the issue of a mood disorder, I always have the question, which came first, the eating problem or the depression? Because if you eat junk, if you eat crap, you feel like crap. So like myself, I had a food addiction. And when I was a kid, I grew up on sugar. Somehow or another, I was addicted to sugar when I was a tiny little kid. And my parents could not get me. I mean, a lot of kids are like that, but my parents, I got away with not eating anything but sugar and white flour all my childhood. I lived on Pop-Tarts, Captain Crunch, spaghetti, Oreos, and all the junk that you can get your hands on. I basically just lived on that. I think my brain was affected. I mean, my ability to think straight in school. I was a terrible student. I didn't even know that I knew, and I thought I was dumb until I quit eating sugar, and then I became an excellent student. Mood-wise, before I knew about eating disorders, I was in a counselor's office, and they were giving me a diagnosis of major depressive disorder. And when I stopped eating sugar, I was magically not major depressive disorder. So, was I depressed? Right. What was the sugar doing to my brain? I mean, I wasn't properly nourished. I was living on not real food. Yeah. It wasn't,
The situation with food and eating, all of that really brings to my mind, foremost this idea of co-occurring situations anyway. Anyone who's done any work in substance abuse will tell you, well, okay, you can deal with what they're consuming, what they're abusing. That's just the beginning. Something caused that, and that's the co-occurring mental health side of this thing. That issue you just described with food is the perfect sort of, a battlefield for that war to be waged. So you see it in families. You see it in families. It would seem to me that it's a very easily learned bad situation. I mean, you're right. If your parents feed you as a youngster bad stuff, you're going to learn to eat bad stuff, right?
Right, exactly. That's right. That's right. When I work with clients, sometimes they've only eaten fast food their whole lives. They've never eaten, and they don't know from healthy food at all. They've never been fed healthy food. They have no idea.
All right, let's talk about some of the treatments that you have used with regard to someone who is strung out on food, sugar anyway. How closely does it model the treatment anybody would get who had a substance abuse disorder?
Well, I mean, okay, so with substances, obviously we recommend abstinence from all mind and mood altering chemicals.
A little tough in your field, right?
Well, it's not really. I guess once you understand, I mean, we still drink. I drink water. I mean, a person who quits drinking alcohol still drinks water and soda and other things. They don't stop drinking. They just stop drinking alcohol, right?
Right. Makes sense.
So we understand the difference between a mood altering drink and a drink that is not mood altering, right? And
Perfect. Yes. Yes.
right. And so
Nobody's talking about stopping eating. It's ridiculous.
We're not talking about stopping eating. We understand that there are foods that are addictive and there are behaviors that are addictive behaviors. And, what we need to cut out are the things that are addictive. Abusing food, like, for example, maybe a normal person, if they have a breakup, they can drown out their feelings in an ice cream binge. But like a food addict needs to understand that one ice cream binge at a breakup will be the end of their recovery. So, you have to find another way of handling your feelings without the ice cream. But the thing with food is a person who's in food recovery, you need to learn what's healthy eating, and you have to separate healthy eating from addictive eating and only do healthy eating and not addictive eating.
With regard to self-medicating, I personally know people. I've watched it. They're usually people I've worked with in stressful situations.
Oh yeah.
They would sit and eat a meal, and I somehow knew that they looked like they were enjoying it. They were eating it, a lot of it, but it was really stress induced. Food addiction is a great way to self-medicate, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They, they use sugar back in many, many moons ago, they used sugar for medicating headaches. And, they use it now when Jewish babies are having a circumcision, they give them a little something, to comfort them. So, yeah.
Well, we even talk about it, treating ourselves. Oh, I'm going to treat myself to 24 donuts. Right. It's all incredibly fascinating. And Dr. Epstein won't blow her horn too loudly, but I will. I mean, this was a revelation to me a year or two. I guess it was longer than that now when we started.
Oh, it's been many years. Actually.
Yeah, started talking about radio. This. Yeah. So it's just fascinating. A couple of kind of eating disorder, food addiction questions 101. What's the difference between bulimia and anorexia?
Well, bulimia is binge eating and purging. So the person has horrible thousands and thousands of calories, usually junk food, and just out of control eating. They both have weight obsession and diet and restrictive eating, but the person who's anorexic doesn't have the binge purge side. They just have mostly the restricting side. Some people who are anorexic could have periods of both. I mean, you have people with complicated, eating disorders has a whole wide range. It's not usually either or. I've met people who have periods of anorexia and periods of bulimia. They finally get on a roll and they figure out how to start restricting, and you get high on being skinny, and that's it's a very different thing than getting high and checking out on the binge, the binge foods. It's very different.
Do we have any idea who is more susceptible to a food addiction or an eating disorder than other people? Is there a typical person?
If you were to look at what people would say, I think you see it like with anorexia, you typically would see more wealthier, higher pressured families where there's more perfectionistic, higher standards, higher expectations. Typically, that's not always true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You oftentimes have these high achieving kids who are supposed, A students who are, pressured to be the best and all, they have to look the best, be the best, no tolerance for any weaknesses, and sort of the weight is just another one of those.
Why do I think that women are more susceptible to this problem than men? Is that true?
I think it's true for anorexia, but it's not. There are men who have anorexia as well. Especially you see that in different men who are involved in sports and, athletes who, you can, I mean, definitely, I see people, I have, well, I don't want to say who, but people around who are doing these competitions, and they have to make sure they have no body fat, and they really have to do all that they can. And they're, running so many miles. And I mean, I don't want to say they all have eating disorders, but
Nah, I've never seen a long distance. I've never seen this is true, never seen like a super marathoner, or one of those Ironman people who ever looked healthy to me. I mean, they look, they look like they could do that, but they didn't really look healthy. Anyway, the other question I had is, I mentioned women because women are under more scrutiny than men when it comes to body type and the way they look and their appearance and all of that. So we all know the role things like social media and Instagram in particular has had a devastating effect on young women with regard to the way they're supposed to look. I know you agree that that's been a factor. What do you think, though, about this swing in the other direction that says, well, for the lack of a better phrase, big is beautiful? So suddenly, and they call them plus-sized women, are to not be scorned or judged as though, and I hate to use this expression, fat is okay. How do you feel about that?
Good question. Well, on the one hand, I will say I agree that people should never be shamed. So I do think that, having worked for years with people who are obese, that fat shaming is so totally crushing to a person's soul that there's absolutely no reason for it ever. And I don't think anyone can unless you've sat and listened to people who have been body shamed, you cannot begin to understand what it's like. Mm-hmm. And I think actually when you ask about reasons for eating disorders, the stories, many of the stories I've heard over the years, there's a parent or a friend or a cousin or somebody who was making body shaming comments during younger years. And it just creates this horrible sense of self that a person never gets out of their head. It's a terrible, awful thing. So no matter what size a person is, they should be cherished and loved and celebrated, and no one should be shamed, no matter what size they are. So that's number one. The thing that's challenging about this is that if they're saying health at all sizes, they're saying you can be healthy and obese. I don't know if that's really true. Is it really true? I mean, my clients who are overweight have trouble walking. They have circulatory problems, inflammation, skin problems. What are they eating? Are they numbing themselves? I mean, is this really a healthy lifestyle? It's not about the weight and the look. And I think that the problem is that in society, we've made such a big deal about the appearance.
Yes.
That, that's the wrong point.
Yeah, that's what troubles me about it is that they, this is beautiful. And that's not the argument we're having, because you're right. Bullying is bullying. But to say an overweight person is endangering their health, or not saying that, I think is foolish. You can't be telling young girls it's okay to be very, obese, no matter how many singers are achieving stardom, because they're overweight. Good for them, but it can't be healthy. Glad you straightened that. I'm glad you and I agree on that, because you're an expert.
Well, when I think psychologically speaking, it's also like, look, for me as a person who, I'm in recovery and I understand today, like what I was eating, there was reasons. First of all, is it healthy are you abusing food? Because I don't care what you look like. I care, are you healthy emotionally? Are you healthy emotionally if you are numbing out your feelings? are you caring about yourself if you're putting trashy food in your body? I mean, it's a self-care thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very much like another syndrome you see among young people who are stressed and confused. And that's cutting and stuff like that. It's just another way of hurting yourself because you are in so much pain. Dr. Rhonda Epstein is our guest. As you can tell by now, she knows what she's talking about. And what we're talking about are eating disorders and food addictions. And you're going to be hearing way, way more about food addictions going forward as people begin to realize what they've been fed. In addition to all the lies, a lot of bad food that have resulted in for real addiction. I know it sounds counterintuitive to say you can be addicted to food, but well, you can. So we appreciate every time she comes and joins us. Before we let you go, Rhona, we're sort of coming out the other side of the pandemic. I can't imagine the pandemic did anything but exacerbate all the problems you see. Is that true?
Oh, for sure. I mean, people have been eating them way through their pandemic. It's just, I think the thing that's sad, the pandemic could have been an opportunity to, you're at home, you can cook, you can exercise, like you don't have to drive back and forth to work, so you have a little extra time. You're not out in places, so you could, it could have been used for self-care, and I think some people did use it for self-care. But I think for some people, the stress was so high, the isolation, the boredom, that, some people just really lost their minds during the pandemic, and all addictive behaviors, all unhealthy behaviors, some people just didn't do well and don't do well alone, and or in the stress of their family situations, just not knowing how to handle the pressures of kids having to do school at home and all the things that there's so much has taken place.
Yeah. It goes well beyond the COVID 15 pounds that we all manage to gain if we're not careful. It's just been a devastating impact across the board. Finally, because this is National Recovery Month, and I've over that time talked to so many people now and got a new perspective on what when we say recovery, what are we talking about, particularly in the mental health area. It's important, as we said at the beginning, to remind people you can get better. So for you say you're in recovery from an eating disorder, a food addiction. For people who are struggling, is it a question of they can actually recover, or is it something they wind up having to just manage? What does recovery look like?
I do believe 100% that people can recover. Just like with substance abuse. I mean, people, you get into recovery groups, you get into therapy, and it's not just like dieting where you get, you can't, in my opinion, it's bio, psycho, socio, spiritual. You got to deal with the physical by shutting down cravings, by getting out the junk food so that you don't keep the addictive behavior alive in your body. If you get the substance out, and deal with the physical by getting your food in its right place, having a food plan that's structured, and you learn to eat your food for nourishment, not for addictive use of emotional management and numbing out and all that. And so you get that real clear. Okay, that's the physical. Then the emotional, we're all eating to escape emotions. Those of us who abuse any addictive behavior is all about escaping feeling. So that then becomes like a big focus is, what do I do to now deal when I feel sad, now deal when I feel bored, now deal when somebody dies, now deal when the stress at work is so high I can't handle it, or financial stress. There's a million things to eat over every single day. You have a fight with your spouse, you have an argument with, one of your kids, or you're lonely. I mean, the excuses never end. Right. And so recovery looks like, what are my skills now for managing all of my life things? If my food's in the right place, and I'm committed to a healthy food plan that gets everything that I need in my meals, not addictive eating, not restricting, only my healthy eating. Then I have to get skills for managing my life. And that involves being involved in a support group, I think, in therapy, because you can't do it by yourself. People can't do this by themselves. There's tons of help out there, and free help, 12-step programs. And in the pandemic, that's the gift of the pandemic. All the meetings are online now. You can get so much help for free online all day and all night. You can go to meetings all over the world now. It's amazing. So there's no reason, no excuse for not getting help. And then the other thing is I believe deeply that, having a psychic change, like a spiritual transformation, where you kind of create a spiritual life where you find peace, and you find a relationship with, in a spiritual relationship, something that enables you to experience, life in a different way. So you're thinking differently, and you're trusting more, and you have a better sense of well-being in your life.
Yeah, that last point is interesting, because it's often dismissed as religiosity or, new age kind of stuff. But the truth is, as you point out, that if you can get to that spiritual place, it tends to cure a multitude of problems all by itself. Rhonda Epstein, thank you so much, Dr. Epstein. Rhona is an accomplished clinician, obviously, medical professional. She's a great speaker on these topics. Published author. You're working on a new book, correct?
I have three. I've got three
books. See what I mean?
Working on the digital course right now. Working on it. I'm working on a digital course. Yeah.
And what is your website? I know you have a great website where people can find out more about you, your practice, and your writing.
Yeah, www.drrhona.com, drrhona.com.
It's great to see you again, and thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it. It's always a lesson for us here on the corner. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. It's a blessing to be with you.
Thanks so much. Thank you all as well. Don't forget, follow us, like us, do whatever you have to. Here on the Behavioral Corner. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Retreat Behavioral Health has proudly been serving the community for over 10 years. Here at Retreat, we believe in the power of connection and quality care. We offer comprehensive, holistic, and compassionate treatment from industry-leading experts. Call 855-802-6600 or visit us at www.retreatbehavioralhealth.com to begin your journey today.
That's it for now. And make us a habit, hanging out at the Behavioral Corner. And when we're not hanging, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter on the Behavioral Corner.